This little boy ran to me crying, saying, "He's not my dad." Then the man started walking toward us. I thought we were all in danger. Final update. Update 3. A few weeks after the police took the guy away, things felt normal again, or as normal as they could after all that. I hadn't seen him, heard about him, or even thought much about him, which was a relief. The girls were back into their routine. The boy's mom seemed to be keeping her distance from him, and I was ready to move on. Then, something happened that flipped everything on its head. It started on a Thursday morning. I was walking the older girls to school, pushing the baby in the stroller, when I saw a familiar face on the sidewalk up ahead. At first, I thought my brain was playing tricks on me, but as I got closer, there was no mistaking it. It was him, the same guy. He was leaning against a lamppost, scrolling on his phone like he didn't have a care in the world. My stomach dropped. My first thought was to turn around and get the girls as far away as possible, but he'd already seen me. He looked up and smiled. Not a friendly smile, but one of those, "I know something you don't" kinds of smiles. My heart was pounding, but I didn't want to scare the girls, so I kept walking, keeping them close and acting like I didn't notice him. As we passed, he called out, "Hey, nanny lady!" My skin crawled. I didn't stop or respond, just kept walking, but my head was spinning. How was he out already? Why was he here? And how did he know where I'd be? I got the girls to school as fast as I could and called the boy's mom on the way home. She didn't answer, so I left her a voicemail, trying to stay calm but making it clear that he was back. By the time I got back to the house, I was in full-on panic mode. I double-checked all the locks and even peeked out the windows to make sure he hadn't followed me. That's when I noticed a piece of paper sticking out of the mailbox. It wasn't there when we left, so someone had to have put it there in the last half hour. My hands were shaking as I pulled it out and unfolded it. It was a note, written in messy handwriting that just said, "We need to talk." I had no idea what to do. Calling the police seemed like the obvious choice, but I didn't have any proof he'd done anything illegal yet. Leaving a creepy note wasn't exactly a crime. Still, I didn't want to wait around for him to do something worse, so I called them anyway. They said they'd send someone to patrol the area, but that wasn't exactly reassuring. That night, I didn't sleep. Every little noise outside had me jumping out of bed to check the locks again. I was exhausted, but there was no way I was letting my guard down, not with the girls depending on me to keep them safe. The next morning, I dropped them off at school and daycare, trying to act like everything was fine, but inside, I was a wreck. Things took an even weirder turn when I got a call from the boy's mom later that day. She sounded panicked and said she needed to meet me in person. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop near the playground, the same one where everything started. When I got there, she was already waiting, looking around nervously like she thought someone was watching her. She had the boy with her, and he looked just as scared. She started talking as soon as I sat down, barely taking a breath. She told me that after the guy was taken away, she'd gone through his stuff, emails, texts, even his social media, and found some things that didn't add up. He'd been lying to her about more than just his job and name. He had multiple social media accounts under different names, all following a disturbing pattern. They were full of photos of kids. Not inappropriate photos, thankfully, but random kids at playgrounds, parks, schools. Some of the photos were clearly taken without anyone noticing. There were even a few of her son. She said she'd reported everything to the police, but they told her it wasn't enough to press charges. They'd keep an eye on him, but without clear evidence he'd broken the law, there wasn't much they could do. She felt helpless, and honestly, so did I. Knowing all of this made his reappearance even more terrifying. He wasn't just some awkward stepdad trying to bond with a kid, he was something much worse. As she was telling me all this, the boy was clinging to her arm, looking over his shoulder every few seconds like he expected the guy to walk in any minute. It broke my heart to see how scared he was. The mom said she was planning to move, but she didn't have the money yet, and she was afraid that even if she did, the guy would find them again. While we were talking, the boy suddenly said, "He's here." Both of us froze. I turned around, and sure enough, the guy was standing across the street, watching us through the window. He wasn't even trying to hide. I could feel my pulse in my ears as I whispered to the mom to stay calm. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, keeping my eyes on him the whole time. The operator told me to stay where we were and that officers were on the way. The guy didn't move, just stood there staring. I tried to act calm for the boy's sake, but inside, I was terrified. It felt like time slowed down as we waited for the police. The mom was holding the boy so tightly, I thought she might never let go. When the police finally arrived, the guy didn't even try to run. He let them handcuff him without a fight, smirking the whole time like he knew something we didn't. The officers took him away, and one of them stayed to talk to us. We explained everything: the photos, the stalking, the note, and the officer promised they'd do a full investigation this time. After that, the mom didn't wait to move. She packed up her things and left town within a week, taking the boy with her. I don't know where they went, but I hope they're safe. As for me, I'm still shaken. Every time I go to the playground with the girls, I find myself scanning the area, looking for anything or anyone out of place. I've learned to trust my gut, though. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And even though I'll never forget the fear of those moments, I'm glad I was there to help. The boy came to me because he trusted me, and that trust might have saved his life. Update 4. After the boy and his mom moved away, things finally started to feel stable again. I kept thinking about them, wondering if they were okay, but I had no way of contacting her. She'd cut off all ties, probably for safety, and I understood. Still, it felt strange to have everything go quiet after the chaos. Life went on, and I started focusing more on the girls, keeping my routines airtight and my eyes peeled for anything out of place. Then, last week, something happened that pulled me right back into the mess. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I had taken the girls to a different playground. This wasn't a place we usually went to, but I figured it'd be good to switch things up. The park was packed with families, and everything seemed normal. The baby was giggling on the swings, the older girls were climbing on the jungle gym, and for a brief moment I actually felt relaxed. That's when I saw it. A man sitting on a bench near the edge of the playground wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. He wasn't doing anything unusual, just scrolling on his phone like half the other parents there. But something about him felt off. It was the way he was sitting, angled slightly toward the playground like he was watching the kids but pretending not to. My stomach twisted as I tried to convince myself I was just being paranoid. But then, as I scanned the park again, I noticed something else. He wasn't alone. A second man, wearing a hoodie, was leaning against a tree a few yards away. He wasn't on his phone or talking to anyone, just standing there, watching. And then a third person, a woman this time, sitting on a picnic blanket with no kids around her, just staring in the same direction. It wasn't random. I immediately called the girls over, trying to act casual. "Time for snacks," I said, herding them toward a picnic table away from the suspicious trio. My heart was racing, but I didn't want to alarm the kids. Once they were settled with their snacks, I pulled out my phone and discreetly took a few pictures of the people I'd noticed. Then I saw the man with the baseball cap get up. He started walking toward the playground equipment, slowly and deliberately, like he was looking for someone specific. My mind was screaming at me to grab the girls and run, but I needed to be sure before causing a scene. I kept one eye on him and one on the girls, who were thankfully too busy eating to notice anything was wrong. He stopped at the jungle gym, glancing around before leaning down to tie his shoe. That's when I saw it. A flash of something shiny in his hand. A phone. He was taking pictures. I didn't hesitate anymore. I grabbed the girls, shoved the baby into the stroller, and got us out of there as fast as I could. Once we were a safe distance away, I called the police. I told them everything. The suspicious behavior, the photos, the way the three people seemed to be working together. They said they'd send someone to check it out, but by the time officers arrived, the group was gone. That night, I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my head. The way they were positioned, the way they moved. It felt calculated, like they were scouting or planning something. I started researching online, trying to figure out what kind of operation they might be running. Human trafficking? A ring of predators? The more I read, the more convinced I became that this wasn't random. The next morning, I got a call from the police. They'd looked at the photos I sent and were able to identify one of the people, the guy in the baseball cap. And guess what? He had a record. Nothing huge, just some petty theft charges and a restraining order filed against him years ago. But it was enough to make them take my report seriously. They said they'd increase patrols around local parks and asked me to stay vigilant. The part that really shook me came later that day. I was scrolling through the pictures on my phone, looking at the ones I'd taken at the park, when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. In the background of one of the photos, partially obscured by a tree, was a car, a dark SUV. It looked like it was parked just out of sight, and the more I stared at it, the more I felt like I'd seen it before. It was the same car that had been parked outside the boy's house the night the guy left the note in the mailbox. My blood ran cold. I called the police again and sent them the photo, explaining the connection. They promised to investigate further, but I could tell they were as unsettled as I was. This wasn't just a random incident. Somehow it was all tied together. Over the next few days, I started noticing more weird things. A car following me for a few blocks on my way home. An unfamiliar face lingering near the daycare when I dropped off the baby. At one point, I caught someone looking into the house through the front window. By the time I got outside, they were gone, but it was enough to convince me that I wasn't being paranoid. I installed cameras around the house and started carrying pepper spray everywhere I went. I even told the girls' parents what was going on, though I left out some of the scarier details. They were concerned but didn't seem to grasp the gravity of the situation. A few nights later, around midnight, I was woken up by a notification on my phone. Motion detected on the front porch. I opened the camera feed, and there it was. The dark SUV parked right outside. The driver's side door opened, and a man got out. He was wearing a hoodie, his face hidden, but I knew it wasn't the guy from before. This was someone else. He walked up to the porch, looked directly at the camera, and smiled. Then he pulled out a can of spray paint and covered the lens. I called the police immediately, but by the time they arrived, the SUV was gone. They searched the area but didn't find anything. The officers said they'd increase patrols around the neighborhood, but I could tell they didn't have much to go on. I don't know what's happening or why I seem to be a target, but I'm done playing defense. If they want to fight, they've got one. I've started keeping a record of everything, every suspicious car, every weird encounter, every gut feeling. I don't know who these people are or what they want, but one thing's for sure, they're not going to get it. Final update. It's been a week since I last posted, and things have escalated in a way I never could have imagined. The SUV keeps showing up. At night, it parks outside my house. During the day, it's been spotted in the neighborhood, circling. The police have been less helpful than I expected. They claim they're doing everything they can, but with every new sighting, it feels like they're getting more frustrated than anything else. I started locking every door and window, checking every corner of the house, every time I hear a noise. My paranoia is at an all-time high, and I'm losing sleep. The baby's been waking up more than usual, like she can sense something's off too. Every night I set up motion detectors, hoping to catch whoever is watching. But then last night, things took a horrifying turn. I was awake, scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself, when I heard it. A knock at the front door. It was late, like around 2 a.m. The knock wasn't urgent or loud, but it was steady, like whoever was out there was just waiting for me to open the door. I froze. My first thought was to grab the phone, call 911, and lock myself in the bathroom with the girls. But before I could even move, I heard a voice through the door. "Open up, it's me." The voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it right away. Then it hit me. It was the boy's mother. I had no idea how she'd found me, but the realization made my blood run cold. She was standing right outside, in the middle of the night, asking for help. After everything, after all the threats, it was her. I didn't open the door. Instead, I called the police, quietly telling them what was happening. The dispatcher didn't ask any questions, just promised they'd send someone over. I was shaking, but I couldn't let my guard down. After a few minutes of silence, I heard it again. The knock. But this time, it wasn't a polite tap. It was pounding, frantic. I could hear her voice more clearly now, begging me to let her in. "Please, they're coming for me. They're going to take him again," she cried. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed my phone, switched off the cameras, and decided to open the door. When I did, there was no one there. Just a manila envelope, sitting right on the doorstep. My heart hammered as I bent down and picked it up. It was addressed to me, in the same strange, neat handwriting from before. The handwriting that had left me a note in the mailbox all those months ago. I opened it without hesitation. Inside was a single sheet of paper, but the words were nothing like I expected. It read, "You're the last one." That was it. No explanation, no threats, nothing else. Just those 4 words, like some twisted riddle. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it, when I heard the unmistakable sound of tires screeching down the street. I rushed to the window. The SUV was pulling away from the curb, heading straight for the end of the street. But this time, something was different. There was a flash of movement in the back seat, something or someone shifting, and in the brief moment I saw, I realized the person sitting in the back wasn't alone. It was the boy. My stomach dropped. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The boy wasn't just a victim. He was part of it. Part of whatever was going on. The entire time I had been thinking he was in danger, but it was all a setup, a carefully planned game to lure me in. The woman, his mother, had been playing her part too. She wasn't just running for her son. She had been part of this whole scheme the entire time. I didn't know how deep this went, or who else was involved. But the truth was clear. The boy wasn't the one who needed saving. He was the one doing the saving. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I grabbed my car keys and went straight to the police station. I couldn't sit around waiting anymore. When I arrived, I rushed to the desk, but before I could explain everything, a detective intercepted me. He was holding a file, and when he opened it, my heart stopped. It was the boy's file. His real name. His birth records. He wasn't who I thought he was. He wasn't even a normal kid. The boy's real name wasn't just a name. It was an alias. A fabricated identity. His entire backstory was a cover. Something designed to hide his true origins. The boy wasn't a victim of trafficking or some random plot. He was the son of a powerful figure in the underground world, a figure I had never heard of. And his mother? She wasn't just a desperate parent. She was his handler, the one pulling the strings, manipulating everything from behind the scenes. The detective looked at me, his face grave. "You've been caught in the middle of something bigger than you realize," he said, his voice low. "And I think you've unknowingly been helping them all along." It hit me then. The entire time I thought I was protecting the kids, doing what was right, but I had been played. All of it, every single thing, had been part of a carefully orchestrated plan to draw me into their world. The boy, the woman, the messages, the threats, it was all connected. I wasn't the hero of this story. I was just another pawn. And now, they had me exactly where they wanted me. As I left the station, the realization sank in. Whoever these people were, they were always a step ahead. I was never going to outrun them. And the worst part? I wasn't sure who to trust anymore. Was anyone safe? Was anyone truly innocent?